Our next speaker for today is Lauren Wu. Lauren is an attorney, a certified information privacy professional, a keynote speaker, and a former healthcare privacy executive. Her work focuses on privacy, regulation, and ethical decision making, often what happens behind the scenes, where policies, timelines, and incentives can quietly shape who bears the cost of success. Her talk today is titled Still Here, Still Working: Designing Accessible Leadership with AI and Empathy. In her session today, Lauren will explore how leadership must adapt when capacity changes, and she is drawing on her own lived experience with disability, recovery, and the use of AI as an accessibility tool. By positioning AI as a tool for reducing cognitive load and enabling sustained contribution, she will challenge us today to rethink who work is designed for and who leaves it behind. Let's welcome Lauren to the summit.
Good day, everyone. I'm Lauren Wu, and I'm thrilled to be here at the AI Innovation and the Future of Work Summit. Before we talk about AI, before we talk about innovation or the future of work, I want to start with a question that most leaders and most leadership conversations never ask. Who is work designed for? Really think about that. The meetings that assume everyone processes information at the same speed, the emails that assume everyone has the same stamina to read 40 threads before noon, the performance reviews that assume last quarter's output is the baseline for next quarter, the leadership models that assume your capacity today will be your capacity tomorrow, and the day after that, and the year after that. We think work is made for everyone, but we have designed work for a person who does not exist. I say we deliberately because many of you in this room are the people who design those systems, the onboarding processes, the performance review cycles, the return to work policies. You build them with the best intentions, but we build them for a person who might not need as many sick days as another, who may not have flare-ups, who may not have child or children who need them at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, someone whose mind and body perform at the same level every single day without fail. And when life proves that person is not real, when capacity changes, when disability enters the picture, when the body or brain says, not today, we do not question the design. We question the person. And I know this because I lived it. 2 years ago, I was leading global privacy and compliance programs in complex healthcare systems. I was advising across business units and geographies. I'm the mother of 3 young daughters, a lawyer, a former ballerina who still carried that discipline into every part of my life. I worked out with a trainer, I practiced yoga, I managed cross-divisional, cross-geographical projects. I drafted regulatory language that later made its way into California state law. I was performing at a high level, and I kept performing. On paper, I was doing everything right. Endurance was my currency, and it had been ever since childhood. But then a pulmonary embolism nearly killed me. I remember the buzzing of the hospital lights, the smell of the antiseptic, holding my husband's hand for what I thought might be the last time. I remember as I left home, I had given each of my girls a kiss goodbye, wondering if it would be the last, and luckily, it turned out it wasn't. But what it was multiple blood clots in both lungs. There was no need to operate, but there was an insurmountable numbers of questions of how an otherwise healthy 40-year-old could end up in this spot. Turns out the answer was burnout. And what followed was not a quick recovery and a grateful return to normal. What followed was vertigo, cognitive loss, migraines that could last for days, 9 months in a wheelchair, and at one point I was seeing 15 different specialists. My calendar, which used to be full of executive meetings and strategy sessions, filled instead with neurologists and hematologists and physical and occupational therapists. The body that once held releve could no longer carry me to the kitchen. But I'm not here today to tell you a survival story. Instead, I'm here today to tell you what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about leadership, about technology, and about who gets left behind. Because endurance is not a leadership skill, design is. There is a moment I actually come back to with some frequency. And it's when I was on the couch reading Snow White to my then 3-year-old daughter. She was curled up against me, waiting for the page the way only 3-year-old waits, with her whole body leaning in. And the words just seemed to blur on the page. I had spent years interpreting dense legal statutes, regulatory frameworks without hesitation. Language was my tool, my weapon, and my entire professional identity. But that evening, the words blurred and rearranged themselves on the page. I lost my place. I stumbled over words I had known since I was 5, and my daughter looked up at me confused. Eventually, I closed the book. I had spent years thinking that I was the smartest person in the room, and I wasn't sure I was the smartest person on that couch. And I thought to myself, if I can't read Snow White to my daughter, how can I practice law? And that is the moment most people expect me to say, I hit rock bottom. But that's not exactly what happened. What happened is slower and honestly harder. I grieved. I grieved a career I'd built piece by piece since I was old enough to know what achievement was and that it was my way out. I grieved the sharp, fast mind I had relied on and the version of myself that could hold 15 things in her head and never drop one. I had built my entire identity around being the most capable person in the room, and suddenly there I was. How many of you right now are struggling with some sense of that? May not be as dramatic or drastic, but how many of you are struggling with some sense of brain fog, fatigue, or loss? Really sit with that. What would that look like for you if some of that capability was gone? My husband believes I will return fully to who I was before, and his optimism is loving. But I have had to sit with a different possibility that even if much of my capability returns, I may not be exactly who I was. Where he sees progress, I see recalibration. But somewhere inside that grief, I started asking a different question. Not, how do I get back to who I was? But what tools exist that can meet me where I am now? And that question led me to AI. Not AI as a novelty, not AI as a buzzword on a conference program, and not even AI as something to debate in the abstract, or even as an AI as a privacy officer, something I've analyzed ad nauseum for privacy and compliance reasons. But AI is a bridge between the leader I was and the leader I still am, not to replace what I lost, but to reconnect me to what remained, not to make me faster, but to make me able. Not artificial intelligence, but accessible intelligence. So let me tell you what AI actually looks like when your capacity changes, because I think most people in this room use AI for speed and capacity. I use it for survival. I remember the first time it worked. I had an idea for a framework, the early bones of what would become my heart right leadership model, but I couldn't get it from my head to the page. I had to start from a blank document, and I'd been staring at it for about an hour, and the frustration was physical. My old self could have outlined that framework in 20 minutes. My new self could feel the idea but couldn't organize it. So I opened ChatGPT and just talked. Stream of consciousness, half-formed thoughts, fragments. I said something like, I'm trying to build a leadership model that starts with seeing people as human and ends with trust. And there are layers in between about environment and alignment and resilience and empathy, and I cannot figure out the right order or how to explain why it matters. And it reflected back a structure. Not perfectly, I reshaped it significantly, but it held up a mirror I needed to see so that I could look at my own thinking clearly. And I sat on the couch and cried, not from sadness, from relief, because for the first time since getting sick, I felt like my ideas were not trapped inside a brain that could no longer process them fast enough. That is what AI can be, not a replacement for thinking, a bridge to it. On my worst days now, when my brain fog is thick and language feels like swimming through concrete, I use Claude and ChatGPT as thinking partners. I speak my ideas, rough and half incoherent, and they help me find the structure I cannot hold in my head alone. They hold the thread when I lose it, and they reflect back my thinking in a way that lets me see what I actually mean beneath the fog. In a way, it's like having a colleague who never gets impatient, who does not look at you sideways when you ask the same question twice, and who just says, here is what I heard. Where do you want to go with this? And Grammarly catches the errors my eyes skip over. Not because I do not know the rules. I spent 20 years writing legal briefs and regulatory frameworks, but my brain scrambles things in ways it never used to. Letters reverse, words drop out, sentences that look right to me are now missing their connective tissue. Grammarly is not a crutch, it's a ramp. On my better days, and there are more of those now, I use AI to extend my reach, to draft and iterate, and to pressure test arguments before I bring them to a client, to take the seed of an idea and explore it from 6 angles when I maybe only have the cognitive energy for 2. And here's what I need everyone in this room to hear. It's so important for these tools to be available for everyone. So let me be more specific because I think specificity really can help. These are my partners. When I'm building a new policy framework, I will open Claude and say, I need to map a data governance structure for a mid-sized organization that processes health data across 3 jurisdictions. And here are my constraints. And I will list them. And Claude will generate a first pass architecture that would have taken me a full day of focused work. I reshape it, but I still apply the judgment that comes from 20 years of legal practice. But I'm starting at 60% with my drafting instead of 0. When I'm preparing for a keynote like this one, I might use ChatGPT to stress test my arguments, like push back on this claim, or what would a skeptic say? And it gives me a counterargument I might need to sharpen my thinking before I ever step on stage, or research to bolster my arguments. When I am reviewing contracts or drafting guidance on a day when my processing is slow, Grammarly is not only catching typos, but Claude is helping me compare documents with my standard clauses, catching moments when my brain transposes a clause or drops a word I know should be there. It's a cognitive safety net. Now, I can feel some of you are thinking, but what about the data? What about privacy? And I'm so glad you asked because I am, after all, a privacy attorney. You should be asking that question. I hold a CIPP US certification, and I spent years building privacy compliance programs around data protection. I did not adopt AI carelessly. So let me tell you what responsible AI looks like. You do not put personally identifiable information into a consumer AI tool. You understand the data retention policies of every platform you use. You use enterprise grade versions when you are handling sensitive work, especially at your companies. And you build a personal AI policy, even if your organization has not caught up yet. That draws a clear line between what you feed the machine and what stays human. I choose AI with my eyes open. As a privacy professional, I know the risks. And I'm telling you, the risk of not using these tools is greater because the cost is not just inefficiency, it's exclusion. And I really encourage you to check with your CISO and your privacy officers to make sure that these tools are available for you. But I am not less of a leader because I use these tools. I am a leader because I use them. AI did not replace my expertise, my 20 years of legal experience, my strategic instincts, and my ability to see risk and opportunity. That is all still mine. It preserved my ability to deploy it. It reduced my cognitive load, standing between me and my own capability. Research shows that AI can increase productivity by up to 40% in certain knowledge tasks. But what matters more is how that productivity shows up, not as speed alone, but as reduced friction between people and their own capability. And that cognitive load is not unique to disability. Every person in this room carries it. The constant synthesizing, the context switching, the 37 tabs open in your brain at any moment, not to mention in your Chrome or email or browser extensions. The mental overload of modern leadership that we have all just normalized. We are all swimming in cognitive load. Some of us are just closer to the surface than others. And that's not just a feeling. Research shows that high cognitive load significantly reduces decision quality, attention, and memory. In other words, the more your brain is juggling, the less access you have to your own intelligence. This is where most AI conversations get it wrong. We talk about AI and productivity, AI and efficiency, AI and disruption, but we almost never talk about AI and belonging. About the people who are one health crisis, one diagnosis, one accident away from being told quietly, politely, but unmistakably they are no longer fit, that the system was not built for them, that maybe they should step back, find something more manageable. More than 1 in 4 adults in the US lives with a disability, and most of those disabilities are not visible. That is not niche. That is your workforce. And that does not count the people navigating chronic illness, caregiving, grief, recovery, or mental health challenges that may come and go unpredictably. And for everyone in this room who is thinking, well, we have an accommodations process for that, I want you to sit with this. Accommodations assumes the default is fine and the person is the exception. What I'm talking about is redesigning the default. And AI can change who gets to contribute, not someday, now. So here are 3 ways we can start using AI as a design tool for work, not just a productivity tool. First, we can use AI to reduce cognitive load for everyone. Most teams are drowning in information, meeting summaries, email chains, Slack messages, reports, and dashboards. The volume is unsustainable, and we have normalized the drowning. We even reward it as though absorbing maximum information is a leadership skill. Start using AI to synthesize, summarize, and surface what actually matters. After every meeting, generate a summary with clear action items so people do not have to hold everything in their heads. You can also use AI to triage inboxes, flagging what needs attention and filtering out what does not. Let AI handle the noise so your people can do the thinking that moves things forward. This is not a disability accommodation. It's actually really good work. And it creates space for the people quietly struggling with information volume to contribute their best work without having to explain why. Second, Use AI to make contribution flexible. Not everyone leads best in a fast-paced verbal meeting. Some people think better in writing. Some need processing time before they can contribute their most meaningful thoughts. Some people's cognition fluctuates throughout the day, the week, or even the month. When we design for different modes of contribution, performance improves. Studies consistently show that asynchronous and written collaboration surfaces more diverse input and higher quality ideas, especially from people who are less likely to speak in fast-paced environments. AI tools like voice to text and real-time transcription, AI-assisted drafting, and asynchronous collaboration let people contribute in a mode and timing that works for them. Send an AI-generated meeting transcript to the team afterwards and invite written responses. Use AI to help people draft their contributions before a high-stakes meeting so they arrive prepared, not ambushed. And when you design for flexibility, you do not just include people with disabilities, you unlock the best thinking from everyone. Because I guarantee some of the smartest people on your team are the quiet ones in meetings, not because they have nothing to say, but because the format was not built for how they think and process. Third, use AI to challenge the assumption of constant capacity. We build organizations that assume people perform at the same level every day, and that is fiction. And everyone in this room knows that it's fiction, but we design around it anyway. People have flare-ups, grief, caregiving emergencies, seasons of recovery that do not flow into neat timelines. Someone going through cancer treatment can still think strategically. They just may not be able to do it for 8 hours straight. Someone managing chronic pain can still lead. They just may need a different rhythm. And AI lets you build systems where people can contribute meaningfully at 60%, 40%, maybe even 20%. AI can help someone draft a strategy document in 2 focused hours instead of 6 scattered ones. It can hold context between sessions so someone does not have to rebuild their mental model every time they sit down. And that is not lowering the bar. That is designing a system intelligent enough not to lose its best people when life gets hard. Because ultimately, we don't lose talent because people can't perform. We lose talent because our systems can't adapt. And you might be wondering, well, what tools do I have to accomplish this? I can help you with that a little bit. So we already went over my partners, but here's an expanded list of some tools that you might be hearing about today and some others that you should know about. Not every tool on this list is for every person, and the point isn't to use them all. The point is to know what's available so you can build a workflow that actually works for your brain and your team. The top row is all about thinking and writing, and that's where we have the Claude, ChatGPT, and Grammarly. Those are the ones I've already covered. The middle row is about voice and meetings, and because some days typing isn't the move. And the bottom row is about workflow, letting AI handle the repetitive stuff so you can spend your energy on the work that actually requires you, requires human judgment, requires decision making. You don't need to adapt these 9 tools. In fact, that would probably be overkill. But you need to find the 2 or 3 that give you and your team back the bandwidth to lead or to do your job well and to allow others to do the same. That's the whole point. But AI alone does not fix the leadership and work design flaws that exist because the real problem is not a technology gap. It's actually a work design problem. If the culture AI operates inside is still built on endurance as a virtue, on presence as a proxy for contribution, and on measuring strength by how much someone can absorb before they crack, then AI just makes a broken system faster. I know that broken system well. I was its best student. I grew up in a home shaped by alcoholism where safety could shift without warning. I learned very young that the way to survive was to be so accomplished, so disciplined, so self-sufficient that no one could ever pull the ground out from under me. And that belief carried me for decades through USC, through a top 10 law school, through big law, and through in-house leadership. Endurance was my currency, and it paid well until my body called in the debt. And that's when I learned capacity is not character. Systems should flex with people. When I started building heart-led leadership, it was not from a textbook, it was from a hospital bed. And the heart pillars grew directly from the question we started with. Who is work designed for? And how do we redesign it? The H in heart stands for humanity. People need to be seen fully, not as output machines, but as human beings with changing capacity and lives who do not pause when they log on. We need to stop asking, why can't they keep up? And start asking, what does this person need to do their best work today? That single shift in question changes everything about how you lead and how you can help support from an HR function. E is for environment. Design the system, not just the role. Examine the pace, the pressure, and the unspoken rules about when it is acceptable to rest or ask for help or resources. Most burnout is not an individual failure. It is a system signal, and the signal is telling you something in the design is unsustainable. AI gives you the tools to redesign those systems if you are brave enough to look honestly at what is broken. A is for alignment. If you say you value well-being, but promote the person who answers emails at midnight or doesn't take vacation time, your team sees the contradiction. They trust behavior, not words. Alignment builds predictability, and predictability builds trust, and trust is the foundation for everything else. R is resilience, not the old definition, the one that really just meant endurance. Real resilience is the ability to recover and continue without destroying yourself. It is knowing when to push and when to pause. It is building teams that sustain high performance over years, not ones that spike for a quarter and burn out at halftime. And T is for trust. Trust is the result of the first four. When people experience your humanity, when the environment supports them, when your words and actions align, when resilience is designed into the system rather than demanded from the individual, they trust you. And trust is the difference between compliance and commitment, between people who show up and people who show up fully. But before I get into an exercise, when we design for humanity, performance follows. Before I get to an exercise where I walk you through some of what we've been talking about, you might be wondering how you can get a copy of these slides. Well, I've got you. If you'd like a copy of the slides, please scan this QR code. And I'll be showing this code again at the end of the presentation. I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed what you've heard so far, and we've got some great content left to come, including a short exercise I think will help you start making small shifts at work. And those small shifts can lead to seismic changes over time. But again, if you'd like a copy of the slides, please scan the code. And with that, let's get to a tangible takeaway that you can bring with you to work on Monday. So, a small challenge for you when you get back to work. Next week, look at one system or one activity, just one, through the lens of who it was designed for. A meeting, a meeting cadence, an approval process, a communication norm, a performance review structure, and ask yourself, does this only work for people operating at full capacity? And what would it look like if we designed it to work for everyone? You do not need to overhaul your entire organization by the following Friday. But if you start with just one honest question about one system and make one small tweak, you can start making incremental changes over time. Ask your team to help you answer it. That is where change starts, not with a keynote, not with a framework on a slide, with a leader willing to look at design and say, this could be better, and I am going to make it better. And since many of you are HR leaders, you don't need permission to start this work. You already own many of the systems that we've talked about here. And for the people who work under you, you are the ones who can make so much of a difference and change. Because here's what I know now that I didn't know when I was in my wheelchair. Leaders who ask, what if people did not have to break to prove that they belong? Those are the ones that will move work forward. Leaders who ask, what if we use technology not just to move faster, but to make room? What if strength looked less like endurance and more like clarity, empathy, and the courage to build something new? Those are the ones that are building for the future of work. And that is what makes what AI makes possible. Not by replacing human leadership or workers, but by making work accessible to more humans. And that is what heart-led leadership is all about. Not leading in spite of your humanity, leading from it. I am still here and I am still working, not because I pushed through, but because I finally had the tools and the courage to lead differently. The future of the work is not faster, it's not louder, and it's not more. The future of work is designed with heart, and it's built for every person in this room, including the ones whose capacity will change tomorrow, because it will eventually. And for all of us. And with that, I want to say thank you so much. Um, I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and thank you so much for the summit for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our speaker, Lauren, for a presentation. Still here, still working. If you would like to connect with this speaker, please be sure to download the free resource that she is sharing with you today using the QR code shown on the slide. If you have any questions for her, place the questions in the Q&A box. She will respond to you personally via email after the summit. Thank you again, Lauren. Let's move on to our next speaker.